Well, in the previous episode, you'll have seen I've got the bonnet off and a plug put in the wiring harness to make the bonnet easily removable. And then the whole intent of that was to allow me to get better access to the radiator and the fan, which has some loose blades. So next up is to drain the radiator. Now on the stock Bugeye radiator, which this is, there's a little drain underneath here, and that's a 7/16. So I'm just going to get that undone, and I'll have another bucket handy. I'm not going to reuse the coolant. As part of my maintenance, I just recently changed the oil after the first 500 or 600 miles, and doing the same thing with the coolant. It's coming out. So when it gets close to full here, I'll just put the radiator cap back in. Yeah, let's do that. And then, oops. And then I can put the plug back in and get another bucket. I'll just move that on the side.
Now that the radiator is drained, I've removed the upper hose and the water temperature sender. I've disconnected the lower hose at the bottom corner and left the bucket in place to catch any more coolant. All that's left is to remove the 4 bolts that hold the radiator to its brackets here, 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 and here.
Now that the radiator's out of the way, I can access the fan and everything on the front end here. So I've discovered that these bolts are in fact loose, but I can see I can tighten those up quite a bit. So even after tightening these up, I do get a bit of free play in the whole system here. What I have discovered, if you watch closely here, when I move the fan blades, the crankshaft pulley moves relative to the nut. And in looking at it a bit closer, it looks like I forgot to put the lock washer in there. So I'll get this off, then I can show you a bit better the free play down here. So let's get the fan blades off. And I'll just tighten those up in a minute. But you can see here, there's the 4 pieces. There's the plate that goes on the front, and then the 2 fans themselves. So you can see if these get even a little bit loose, there's lots of room for rattling and what have you. So I'm pretty sure that was contributing to the rattling noise.
Just let me get these tightened up here. All right, there's that tightened up. Now without the fan blades in there, if I move the pulleys up here or the fan belt, should be able to see that that pulley there move a little bit. So that means another domino in the stack for getting this all fixed up. This is an 1 5/16 bolt. I did just pick up the appropriate size socket, but as you can see, this front cross member, if I go down here and look underneath the steering rack, you can see right in here, I can't get a socket on there. So what that means, in order to get access to that, I have to lift the engine up a couple of inch or an inch or so, so I can get a socket on the end of here. So what I'll have to do is disconnect the motor mounts on either side. There is an advantage to getting this far into this, though, is I can double check all my alignment of all my pulleys. When I initially installed the generator, I did notice there was a bit of misalignment, so I did put a washer in right in behind here between the front mounting plate of the generator and the water pump. So I'm pretty confident that we're very close, but once I get the lock washer in behind that crank bolt, I'll double check all my alignment and I'll be able to start putting things back together. Okay, what I've decided to do is just take the 6 bolts that hold the 2 motor mounts in. There's one on the front side of each one, and then there's 2 on the back side. So I've got all of those bolts out. So what I'm going to do now is I'll get these buckets of coolant out of the way, get my jack and a block of wood, and then we'll get the engine jacked up, and hopefully I can get it up enough, even if it tilts a bit, to get access to the crank bolt. Well, I ended up using a small piece of wood right at the front of the oil pan. It goes across the full width, as you can see down there. I've got it jacked up, and this is the 1 5/16 socket I picked up, and I'll put a link in the description below where you can get one if you need it. And I've got it up just enough to get the socket on there, and I've got lots of room to get my breaker bar into there as well. What I may do, I'll have to see how things go. I may just have to put a block of wood underneath here so I get enough leverage to be able to turn this. So next up, just get the breaker bar out, try and break that bolt loose so we can get the lock washer in place. Now the car is in gear, the brake's on, so hopefully I'll be able to break this loose without too much problem. There we go. Perfect. So I'll pull that bolt out of there. And I did find the lock washer that was supposed to go on there. So I'm going to put that into place. And I'll just have to figure out how best to lock that in, because there's no, you can see there's a key on here, but there isn't one coming through far enough down in here. So put that on. Put this back into place. Like that. And I'll just go and look up the torque numbers for that and see where we're at. Okay, I've got the lock washer and the bolt back in. I'm just going to get my torque wrench and torque that to the proper setting, which is 70 foot-pounds. And get this on. There we go. So I'll push one part of the lock washer into the, there's a notch in here, and I'll bend the other side up against one of the flats of the bolt, and that should lock that in place. Okay, I've got the, the lock tab all kind of bent into where it has. And while I had this apart,
I thought, well, I remember having a challenge finding a mark for timing. So what I've done is I've just taken some yellow touch-up paint and put it around the notch in the back of the pulley so that in the future when I go to time it up again, if necessary, it'll be easy to spot. So now I'm ready to lower the engine back down and get the motor mounts bolted back up and start putting everything back together. I have the motor mounts all bolted back up and tightened up. I've got the belt back on and the generator back in position, and I have eliminated the play in this front pulley. I've also checked the alignment of the pulleys. Now they're all the same width, and I just used a steel rule to go across. Well, now that I have everything lined up, I'm ready to put the fan on. Now, unfortunately, the fan I ordered has not arrived yet, so I'm going to have to leave that for the next video. Well, thanks for joining me for this week's episode. I'd like to say thank you again to everyone who supported the channel, either financially by hitting that super thanks button below the video here, or by purchasing merchandise. For those of you for leaving comments and getting a hold of me by email, which I'll put the address at the bottom of the screen here. Again, thank you for your support and your encouragement. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to share it with your friends. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget that little bell icon. Click on that and you'll get notified when the next video comes out. My name is Ian. This is the Econobox Garage, and we'll see you next time.